Hi, and welcome back to Death and Beyond, Part 10. Today, our topic is the very interesting, fascinating, and also slightly unsettling topic of reincarnation. Now, as for me, myself, personally, I have rejected the option that reincarnation could be real for a very, very long time. I've just rejected it right away. And the reason for that is that the idea that I could, after a long life, then forget everything and just go back to start and start all over again, and to do that again and again and again and again was just very, very unattractive for me. Actually terrifying, horrifying. I hated the idea, so I rejected that. I'm the type of person who doesn't want to repeat one class at school, so that's just a no-go for me. Really horrible idea. To forget everything I've learned and mastered and all that, and go back to start. And then there are other reasons why I found that horrible. The idea to go back and be a dependent, helpless child again, that's entirely dependent for its survival on its environment and has to do what others say to it. That's also an idea that I really abhor personally, probably because for me freedom is a very huge value and something that's really important for me. And now I've finally grown up and managed to, carve out a certain amount of freedom, although I'm not where I want to be in that regard yet, but it's a decent amount of freedom for myself, personal freedom, and I have fought for that. And to think I should go back to dependent and helpless is in itself just really unattractive for me. And then on top of that, you never know. I mean, you are dependent on your parents. You never know what kind of parents you get next time, right? Next time around, it could be much worse. And that's the other thing that I think personally, I've had a lot of luck. I'm very privileged in this life. I've had a lot of luck about where I've been born, when I've been born, especially as a woman. Historically, that's the best time to be a woman. Can't get much better when you look into the past, maybe in the future. Also, the family I've been born into, the parents I have, the gifts I've been given physically and mentally, in terms of intellect and all that, the options I have, the potentials I have, the chances I have been given, all that is pretty good. I'm really happy with that. I mean, yes, it could be even better, but it could be much, much, much worse. I'm already very high up the ladder in that respect, looking at it on a global scale. So I've been lucky. This is a good life. So chances are next life could be worse. Or if not the next life, then if I have quite a few lives to live in the future, I mean, many, many lives, how are the odds that all of them are at least as decent or better than this one? It's very probable that at least one of them will be a lot worse. And I don't want that. Obviously, very unattractive for me. I'm still not happy about this idea that reincarnation could actually be real. Yeah, I really don't think about future lives. I'm focusing on this life. I mean, I'm curious about past lives because it's interesting to know when have they been, how have they been and all that. And yeah, but they are over. That's done, at least in this time continuum that I'm operating in with my mind, with my ego mind, so to speak, my human mind. This is past and the future is yet to come, and that's not very, very attractive. I mean, there are different perspectives to that, but that would go too far here to discuss it now. But yeah, so I'm not happy about the idea that reincarnation could be real. Yet I have come to the conclusion that I should dig deeper into that and do some research on that. And the reason for that is that in a couple of near-death experiences, there have been descriptions that either hint at reincarnation being real or actually don't leave much room for interpretation. They'll make it quite clear that reincarnation is real, that we all have multiple lifetimes. Obviously, not everything that has been reported from near-death experiences, not every detail must necessarily be true and real, because of the fact that a lot of things can't be remembered once the people are back in their bodies. A lot of details can't be remembered. So these are fractions of what they have learned during the near-death experience. And these fraction puzzle pieces may seem different from what they are if you can look at them within a bigger picture that we don't have. The other one is that it's all filtered through human consciousness then again, and needs to be expressed in human language. So these are other limitations and restrictions too. So all of that, yes, can mean that a near-death experience description and the description of what people have gained in terms of insights during the near-death experience about how life and the world works in general may not be completely correct in every detail, which would also account for, certain contradictions that you can find in different near-death experiences. But this was something that came up frequently enough that I thought could be something to it, could be real, should be explored. So I did that, did some research on it, and I found a book, and it's a book by Ian Stevenson, who is a medical doctor. This is the German version of it. Obviously, he's an American medical doctor, or he was an American medical doctor. I think he's deceased meanwhile. And that means that the original has been written in English. It's called Where Reincarnation and Biology Intersect. So I would actually link to the English version in the description if you are interested in reading that. The German version originally came out in 1997, so the English one would be a little bit earlier. So I will research that and put it into the description for you. And what I read was the newest German version from 2011, which was the time when I was going on to this quest again, 2011, 12 and following. So that was a really fresh edition of the book back then. Now, the interesting thing about this is that obviously reincarnation is something that can be only accessed indirectly unless you go for your own experiences and your own past lives. That's another topic for another part of this show. But the interesting thing is that Stevenson tried to get some objective element into the research on reincarnation. Because what you usually do is that you have someone who has memories from a past life. And mostly that's little children who still remember past lives. And then at some point these memories fade away and they focus more on their current life. So sometimes this forget everything filter isn't really properly in place. And then what you can do, obviously, is to take this information that the child shares about their past life and try to verify that. And then you can check how probable is it that the child had heard something about that, seen something about that, and just integrated that into a fantasy, and how probable is it that it actually couldn't know about that. So this is some sort of hint to a different source of this information in the child than normal, reasonable ways of communication that could have happened. And obviously that's not always something you can very precisely exclude, that the information could have come to the child somehow in other ways. But what Stevenson has added is an additional layer of objectifying, so to speak. So, and that is that he checked out moles and birthmarks and also deformations of the body of a child, which were already present at birth and were somehow remarkable. And he checked if they somehow relate to wounds the person whose life the child remembers as its own prior life had incurred, especially right before death. So it's often violent deaths or accidents or surgery that has happened that is checked out here. So essentially what he tries to find is, can we verify the information the child has related? And then in this information, is there something that points to the cause of death? And can we locate the people that were around the person whose life the child remembers as their own prior life? And then speak to the people, to these people, if they can be located, and ask them about details also about how the person died and if there were any wounds or accidents or whatever. And some wounds have been remembered by witnesses. Some wounds also have been written down by doctors, so they are in doctors' records, or there has been a surgery, so the hospital has the records. So there's even a more objective layer of, information available, and then you can check back. And what he has done is essentially to check back if the birthmark, the mole, the deformation of the body of the now person, so to speak, which they have been born with, if that somehow corresponds to the wounds incurred by the person they remember to have been in their prior life. And when that happens, that's actually quite interesting and quite astonishing, I would say. And there are also images in the book. And for those of you who are not on the audio podcast, but on the YouTube video, I will show you an example. For example, when you look at these limbs that look like a rope has been tied around them, or they have been mutilated somehow. And it's quite astonishing that, a child would be born with a deformation like that on their limbs, and then to find out that they remember to have been a different person in the prior life, and then to find out that that person had been subjected to some sort of treatment that would have caused this sort of deformations on their body. That's quite interesting. So obviously there is a bit to discuss about how much of a proof this can be and what the problems with that are. And I want to do that in the next episode, in the next part of the series, and just look for the cases that I found most interesting, most fascinating, most convincing, and report a bit about that, and then have a little discussion about how to think about that, how much of an evidence that actually is. But it's quite interesting research in any case. Stevenson has brought this together, and I think that's even a smaller book. I think there's even a larger book about it in the original English in any case, and has worked on this several years and traveled the world. He has done some in the United States, but also a lot of his research in India. And the reason for that is that it's often that small children have some sort of memory when the forgetfulness filter isn't working properly yet. And they sometimes talk about it. And then in our Western culture, parents and relatives and people around them, adults around them, would say, yeah, well, that's a fantasy, and won't take it seriously, and thereby discourage the child from talking about it, and then they will eventually forget about it. And so nobody will remember that. But in cultures where reincarnation is taken for granted, that's different. The adults around the child will remember what the child has reported, and they won't discourage it from talking about it. So that is makes it easier to find cases. And there are cultures like that in the United States, but even more so in India. So that's why he traveled for that. So in the next episode, we'll look at some of the cases, or maybe one or two. I really have to recheck the book to find out which ones were most impressive for me, and then have a discussion about that. And yeah, hope to see you soon to follow along for this next step in the dive into reincarnation, which is hugely uncomfortable as a topic for me. And yeah, have a good time. See you soon, and bye for now.